Welcome to the PinLeader Podcast, where strategic leaders get straight to the topics, strengthening our awareness and sharpening our minds. The PinLeader Podcast is produced by Roar, a production division of Mays & Associates Ltd. Find out more at www.maysassociatesltd.com. Now here is your award-winning host, Dr. Shanda Gore.
Hello and welcome to the PinLeader Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about Inside the Boardroom, and I have with me Mr. Pat Bowe. He serves as chairman of the board for the Andersons. Pat is the former president and CEO of the Andersons, a $14 billion agricultural supply chain company where he led a major organizational turnaround and guided more than 2,400 employees across 110 locations. Before that, Mr. Bowe spent over 30 years at Cargill, rising to corporate vice president and becoming one of the top 15 executives at the world's largest private company. Today, he sits on several influential boards, including King Ranch and previously United Malt Group, Swans, and Fabcon. Mr. Bowe holds both a bachelor's degree in political science, a master's degree in economics from Stanford University. And before his corporate career, he played tight end for Stanford, earned academic All-American honors, and even signed with the Green Bay Packers as a free agent. From the field to the C-suite to the board, Mr. Pat Bowe brings an extraordinary perspective on leadership at every level. So, Pat, welcome to the PinLeader Podcast.
And thank you very much. It's good to be with you.
Oh, so I am going to get right into this because you have been heavily involved in boards, but you've also held the role as president and CEO. And currently, it sounds like, again, you are the head of the actual board. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between the CEO and that board chair?
Sure, I'd be happy to. As you mentioned, so I was president and CEO of the company, of the Andersons. It's a public company based here in Maumee, Ohio. And I just retired this past year and became full-time as chairman of the board. Took over for my predecessor, who was also the former CEO, Mike Anderson. So we have a different, maybe, way we do it out, and we've had the CEO stay on as a chairman, and not every company does that. But so I'm really honored to be chairman of the board. It's fun to stay connected to the company that way. To answer your question was about the switch, right, from CEO to board. So some companies, as you know, the CEO is also the chairman. And then a public company will have what they call lead independent director. So they want to have some independence. Our company, we have a lead independent director as well. I think the big shift for me personally, it's about going from an active role where you're managing the company to a less active role where you're overseeing from a governance standpoint and a strategic standpoint, but you're not hands-on involved day to day. So I had a boss who once called it nose in and fingers out. So let the manager run the company and you're there as an advisor.
Mm-hmm. That's a major mind shift away from what your role was. How long did it take you to do that?
Yeah, so it's just been the first year this year. My predecessor, Mike Anderson, was chairman, and he did a very nice job. He was basically, hey, if you need me, call me. Otherwise, I'm going to leave you alone, right? And I've kind of tried to take the same stance with Bill Kruger, who's the new CEO of the Andersons. But we worked together so closely before. He was COO. We still talk all the time, right? So it's kind of been an easy transition in that regard for the company.
That also creates consistency, I would think, too.
Right. So I was the first non-family member and first outsider to come in as CEO of the company. So that was new for the Andersons. And Bill was the CEO of a company we acquired. So we acquired his company, Lansing Trade Group, about 10 years ago, or maybe 7 years ago. And he then moved in, and then we moved up in the company to become COO, which was sort of a training ground position for a couple of years before he took over as CEO.
Excellent. Well, we're talking about high performance in boards because, again, Anderson's is such a big company and you have this huge supply chain. What characteristics do you see or that you think strong board members should share?
Yeah, I don't know how big of a company we are, but we're in a big industry and we're probably a medium-sized player in our industry. I do think we have a high performance board. We have a really collegial board where people seem to get along. It's every time we get together, we got to talk about everybody's families for the first 20 minutes just to catch up. But I think that one thing is important, that collegiality, that people need to get along. You hear sometimes about someone puts a hostile member or an adjutant on the board that makes it very hard to get along with, or you have one individual who has a super strong personality that's kind of a bully, and that just doesn't work, right? So I think the key thing is for board members to ask really good questions and come in very well prepared, do all their homework, do all the pre-reads, be ready, and then bring some expertise. So our board is like many, we're very diverse. So we have a banker and a lawyer and someone from the ag industry and someone from the consulting industry and someone from the energy industry. So they bring different experiences and we want to learn from those.
So that sounds like a culture that you're trying to build, and that you have is that being able to get along, but also to bring their expertise and to be able to come into the room with that expertise and share it.
Right. And I've seen that on other boards I've served as well. Probably the most, I think, important skill set is to be a good listener, right? And to really, you think about it, when you're in management, you're reviewing this information every single day. When you're on the board of directors, you come together 4 times a year. So many times we use jargon in industry, or we talk about things like, oh, don't you guys know what we're talking about? We sometimes as board members, we have to catch up, right? To keep pace. So that's what's important for board members to do homework and stay up to it. And send out questions in advance or call management to talk through something ahead of time. So during the board meeting, we don't want death by PowerPoint, people presenting, because we've already read it, right?
Right. Or you should have read it. Right.
Yeah, should have read it. We want a good discussion.
What would be the best scenario? And it sounds like you've had this because you've held both the CEO position and now you're the chairman. What does a productive relationship look like with those roles? Again, you mentioned a little bit about stepping out of the way and not getting into and that was a great saying that you had. But what else would it look like? What are the dynamics, especially for those that are listening, not only in our local area, but in different states now and across the world, because we have a number of different in countries. If they have a board or they're starting to institute a board, what would you suggest?
I think it's really important to understand the boundaries. So as we mentioned, the board in a public company, we're the fiduciary stewards of the company. So we're hired by the shareholders to represent the shareholder in overseeing the strategy of the company. And they're the ones who hire and fire the CEO, right? So I like to say there's 3 big things a board does: select, hire, fire the CEO, review the strategy presented by management and sign off on it. And then I think a really important one is the allocation of capital. So anytime we're going to have a big acquisition, or we're going to do something specifically with whether it's buying back shares or do something that involves finances, the board will approve that. So the board needs to make sure that the allocation of capital matches the strategy, right? So we don't have some crazy CEO comes in, oh, I want to buy a computer gaming company when we're not even in the industry. So just make sure you keep it on track.
I was going to say that would be a challenge if you've got a direction and you have a strategic plan. But have you ever experienced or have you ever witnessed where there's a strategic plan that's in place and someone is coming in, and because you sit on so many boards, and just, again, that strategy didn't really match up with what the strategic direction was supposed to be?
Yeah, exactly. We had that in our own company. One time we came forward with a project. It was a small deal, but it was not on point in our strategy. And the board just said, whoa, what are you doing? We never talked about this before. And they were right? And they kind of brought us back within the guidelines. So I think it's very important. The CEO needs to be very clear about why some action the company is taking. Let's say an investment of a plant or a new product or a new service, why that fits into the strategy. That's really important for the board to understand that connection between the strategic initiatives on a broad base of the company to specific actions that they're taking.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking about those that might be listening who are saying, well, I'm a private company. I don't have anything public, but maybe I should consider going public. Any suggestions, especially because you've got boards now involved?
Yeah, I was going to say, don't do it. Being a public company has its pros and cons, right? So people want to IPO and go public to raise capital generally, but there's a lot of other things that come with it, a lot of requirements of how you have to work with your investors and bureaucracy and costs, frankly, that go with that. And I sit on the board of a private company called King Ranch. It's a large ag farming operation based out of Texas. And I also worked for Cargill for 30 years. Cargill's the world's largest private company. It's over a huge company with 75,000 employees in 70 countries and a very big $85 billion company, but it's owned by one family, has been for its entire 160 something years. A private company has some benefits, right? You hear about quarterly earnings and need to hit a number, then the stock goes down if it misses it. Where a private company can kind of look to the future more. You can have private companies, smaller ones, where the owner, CEO, does what he or she wants to do. And sometimes they need governance from outsiders to say, that's not such a good idea. I think it's kind of depends, but I think there's a lot of benefits to being private. But being well governed and having a board of a private company, I think is very important. Getting outside voices. And even when the Andersons was private many, many years ago, they brought in outside advisors to help them with the strategy. So I think it's important for private companies to have a board.
I was thinking about the differences. Sometimes there's confusion. I've sat on both governing boards as well as advisory boards. And right. I think sometimes there's confusion between the two. Have you witnessed that?
Yeah, and probably seen more of that in nonprofits. I'm on several nonprofit boards here in Toledo, and I think the first thing is many people are on nonprofit boards because they care and they want to support community or whatever the association is. And then they usually are donors many times. But they also have, as I spoke earlier, a fiduciary responsibility to the organization. Sometimes you have to tell the director of that organization, hey, you're off target. Right. So, and that's not so fun in a nonprofit because everybody wants to get along. And that's where advisors can be quite important for nonprofits because, as you well know, Shanda, many nonprofits just don't have a lot of staff.
That's
so they
right.
just don't have the resources. So using advisors in the nonprofit world is a great thing to do. So many times boards of nonprofits are really advisory and governance, right?
They're wearing multiple hats. I know a number of nonprofits that everyone's got 3 or 4 different jobs wrapped up into it because it's a small and they're putting the resources, which they should, but back into whatever the mission is. And
I think I recommend people serving on nonprofit boards. It's a great way to understand how board governance works and learn what it's like to be on a board, albeit it's a little bit different, but it's a great way, especially even if it's a small nonprofit, to just get your feet wet, learning how the minutes are managed, what Robert's Rules of Order look like, and how motions are put forward and approved. It's a good experience.
I'm going to ask, in the book I talk about, in the PinLeader Path, I talk about the 3 attributes of the most effective leaders that I've come across in 20 years of putting the book together. Having a plan, being straightforward and communicating and being able to pivot. And I talk about these different items of, like, again, being sharp, experienced, seeking out education where you need, if you don't know, especially talking about boards. But there's also the strength of character, being able to have that strength of character. Out of the 3 attributes, what would you say is probably one of them, if you were to rank them, especially for boards, what would you say would be important?
Well, that's a good point. And I think you're hitting on all the right items. I'd say the strength of character, because the board gets, a lot of times you'll have dilemmas about, what you should choose on a person, right? What kind of people do you want to lead the company? What are their values? How do they fit? And I think that moral compass and really being true to your word in regards to that, it can make a big difference at a board.
Excellent. Yes, I find that strength of character, people want to follow people they can trust. And that comes down to, from your experience, what's the most important thing for any CEO can do to build trust with their board?
Yeah, I think it's not much different than your regular workplace, right? So I'd say the 3 items I think to focus on for leaders, and this is true with the board, is number 1 is communication. And those communication skills, you really have to be an effective communicator, both verbally and written, because many times in the board we're writing pre-reads for the board to read. We also use videos at the Andersons, which we found to be quite effective to get you watch them ahead of time before the meetings to kind of get up to date on things. But that communication and communicative style, that your relationship with the board is very clear and honest. Then I think the second one is just work ethic, right? It's just, you got to put in the hours, you got to put in the effort, and you have to lead by example. So if you want the company to be a strong integrity, and you better be a person of strong integrity, right? Or whatever that is, work ethic is critical. And the third one, I think, is that strategic thinking. So when it comes to the board and CEO level, you're really talking about big ideas, right? It's not tactical things you do at work every day. Those are things we expect people to be able to do, but these are thinking, where do we want to go? What do we want to be? And how are we going to get there, right? So really thinking strategically about taking the company or organization to the next level. And that's probably the three things I'd focus on.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, now comes my fun question is what are you reading and what are you watching? Because I know you do so much with travel and getting to the different boards that you're responsible with being part of. But, what are you reading? What are you watching?
Well, that's always fun. So reading wise, I have two stacks. I have the fun stack and the business stack. So my fun stack, I've always been a John Grisham fan, and he has a new book called The Whistler. I just started that on a plane.
I love him.
So I just started, so I can't tell you about this one, but I like Grisham books. And then business books, I'm a big skimmer, I'll be honest. When I get a big, thick business book, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I start skimming it. But I love when people ask. I was just at a local college in business class, and they were asking about what are great books. And I'm a big fan of Jim Collins, The Good to Great and Built to Last. And he was a classmate of mine at Stanford.
Okay.
Been a little more successful than I am. So I love his books. I also love a book called The Go-Giver, which is a good read for students or for anybody. And I also love all the Patrick Lencioni books, the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team and The Advantage and The Motive. They're easy to read and they're good storytelling for business. So I think those are business books I like to share with people.
Excellent. Excellent.
My wife and I, after COVID, we were not big TV watchers, and we've become that, unfortunately, I guess. But we only stream and watch shows because we started power watching shows. And we're now, for the serious side, we're started The American Revolution, which is a Ken Burns documentary. And I love his stuff with jazz, baseball, all the ones he did. That's a great learning one, but we like fun stuff too. So I like Landman that's on now with Billy Bob Thornton. We're watching that. And there's a cute show out called A Man on the Inside. It's got Ted Danson, the Cheers guy.
Yeah.
And his wife's name, Mary Steenburgen or something. It's just a cute, fun little show.
Well, I'm just like you. I was not watching shows or stream shows until COVID came along. And then I got to experience it. And then I didn't understand that whole, you get in it, you keep watching show after show, because I was trained up on television where you had a gap, like a week, 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I think they're trying to do some of that now. But yeah, I like to just sit and watch, if I have the time to sit and watch shows back to back.
Yeah, that's our evening relaxed time, is to just watch one, not too much, but just enough to be entertained.
Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and then sharing your experiences. I appreciate that board perspective as well as the role of CEO. And I know I have a number of listeners that are heading up their companies. And it doesn't matter for those listening if you're big or if you're small. This is advisement that you can take back and really apply, understanding that if you're not dealing with boards, you're dealing with customers. And that is something to think about too, because to me, I also see the board as a customer of the company. Very much so. So thank you again. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Shanda. Great to speak with you, and wish you all the best.
Thank you. And we'd like to thank you, our listeners, for sharing the show and liking it. And we'd like to thank our sponsor, J. Foster Jewelers, family owned, offering the finest natural gemstones, stunning engagement rings, and brilliant diamonds. So until next time.
The PinLeader Podcast is hosted by Dr. Shanda Gore and brought to you by Mays & Associates Ltd., creating customized solutions for growth in the areas of leadership development, strategic planning, and culture building Find out more at www.mazeassociatesltd.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the PinLeader Podcast and share with others.